A crucial Republican presidential debate begins just hours after the leading conservative on the U.S. Supreme Court dies.
We need to put people on the bench that understand that the Constitution is not a living and breathing document. It is to be interpreted as originally meant.
Who on this stage has the background, the principle, the character, the judgment, and the strength of resolve to nominate and confirm principled constitutionalists to the court?
The death of Justice Antonin Scalia underscoring the enormous stakes in the election of the next president.
I think that we ought to let the next president of the United States decide.
And questions for that next president.
What we want to do, when we want to do it, and how hard do we want to hit.
But it was a previous president that created a fiery moment early.
George Bush made a mistake. We should have never been in Iraq.
I am sick and tired of him going after my family.
The World Trade Center came down during his brother's reign.
My mother.
I thank God all the time that it was George W. Bush in the White House on 9/11 and not Al Gore.
Taxes.
Millions of people can't, talk about what other people have to pay and have no skin in the game.
Social Security.
I'm the only one going to save Social Security.
And old-fashioned politics.
This is just crazy, huh? This is just nuts. Okay.
Analysis of the presidential debate ahead of the South Carolina primary. America's election headquarters starts right now.
Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Over the next hour, we will break down tonight's Republican presidential debate, who did well, who didn't, and what the race looks like now. With one more week of intense campaigning before the next voting, the South Carolina primary a week from today. Let's begin with our man in Greenville, South Carolina, at the site of the debate, senior national correspondent John Roberts. Fiery night, John.
Fiery night, to say the least, Brett. And I think if I were to pick a couple of moments out of tonight's debate that are really illustrative of where this race is going to go in the next 6 days, first and foremost among them would be the dust-up between Jeb Bush and Donald Trump. Jeb Bush knows that in order to try to make an impact here in South Carolina, he's got to be the person who's willing to stand up and punch Donald Trump in the face and bloody his nose. And that's what he tried to do tonight. Watch these exchanges.
Just so you understand, you know what that is? That's Jeb's special interest and lobbyists talking. Look, let me just tell you something. Jeb is so wrong.
I could care less about the insults that Donald Trump gives to me. It's blood sport for him. He enjoys it, and I'm glad he's happy about it. While Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did.
The World Trade Center came down during the rain. He kept us safe. That's not safe.
Now, that exchange is particularly significant because on Monday, George W. Bush, the 43rd president, Jeb's brother, will be here in the state. He'll be in North Charleston campaigning with Jeb Bush. Donald Trump is on pretty solid ground when it comes to this idea the Iraq war was a mistake. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party, particularly independents as well, who believe that. It starts to get a little more dicey when he says that the Bush administration lied about it. You'll hear that from the Democrats. But when he says the World Trade Center came down under George Bush's watch, that's where it starts to get tenuous for Donald Trump, because there are not many people in the Republican Party who would blame the World Trade Center, who would blame 9/11 on George Bush. So we'll see where this goes in the coming days. The other exchange I thought was really significant was the rematch between Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz over immigration. And we heard Charles talking just before the top of the hour about Rubio's trying to make people forget what happened last week in New Hampshire. If you watch this exchange, people will probably remember the one line that came out of Marco Rubio's mouth here. Watch.
Marco went on Univision in Spanish and said he would not rescind President Obama's illegal executive amnesty on his first day in office. I have promised to rescind every single illegal executive action, including that one.
I don't know how he knows what I said on Univision, because he doesn't speak Spanish. And second of all, the other point that I would make...
Marco, si quieres, díselo ahora mismo, díselo ahora. En español, si quieres.
Look, this is a disturbing pattern now, because for a number of weeks now, Ted Cruz has just been telling lies.
Brett, I would hazard a guess that not many people will remember Marco Rubio repeating himself in New Hampshire. They'll probably remember that. The gloves clearly off in a state where bare-knuckle politics is the way it goes, and it's going to be a rough ride over the next 6 days, and we'll be watching every minute of it. Brett?
John Roberts, gracias. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, Kirsten Powers, USA Today columnist, and David Drucker, senior congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Okay, Steve.
I mean, what a night. What a debate. Look, Marco Rubio, after his stumbles last week, in general, he had an okay debate, but he had those memorable stumbles where he sounded robotic. They were played in a loop on cable television. He probably needed the debate of his life tonight, and I think he got it. I think he was clear and clean the best debater on the stage.
You know what people are going to run right in. You're in the tank for Rubio. What's the deal? Did he really, you think, had the debate of his life tonight?
I think he clearly had the best debate on the stage tonight. I think it was one of the better performances, and I was down in Florida with him when I saw him do the other debates in 2010. Yes, I think if you want to be specific about it, he gave a great answer on national security to start within the space of a minute. Talked about Asia, talked about the Middle East, talked about the need to rebuild our defenses. He took a tough question from Kim Strassel on tax policy about whether his plan favors child tax credits in a way that liberals might like. And he said, look, this is their money, which I thought was a very good answer. I thought he fought Ted Cruz on immigration to basically a draw, as Charles Krauthammer said. He jumped in to defend George W. Bush on Donald Trump's criticisms of Bush on national security in a state that has 21% veterans that voted in 2012. I thought that was a good night. I thought his closing statement was good. And most importantly, he didn't have any of those moments. I mean, I think for anybody who thought Marco Rubio is incapable of answering questions extemporaneously, like that was blown away tonight. And I thought on the other side of that, I thought Donald Trump had a terrible night. This was Donald Trump at his most unhinged, where he was at some point screaming and yelling. I also thought Jeb Bush had a good night. I thought Ted Cruz had a good night tonight. Okay, Kirsten, the crowd clearly was anti-Trump. I don't know what they were, whether they were pro-Bush or pro-Rubio or something, but they didn't line up with Trump.
Yeah, and as in the last debate, he blames that on the fact that he claims these are all donors. I think I agree with you. The Rubio had a really strong night. I think he definitely bounced back tonight.
Are you in the tank, Rubio?
I am not in the Rubio tank, but
Just reading from Twitter.
He clearly had a good night, and I think even and Jeb had a very strong night as well. But if you look at when Trump was going after George W. Bush, which it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out in a primary where about 80% of people have a positive impression of George Bush. So it will be interesting to see how this sort of almost Ron Paul type attacks on George Bush about 9/11, things that Democrats frankly don't even say in their debates that he was saying. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think that Rubio in that exchange really outdid Jeb, because Jeb was defending, and I think Jeb was good, but Rubio really had the money lines, saying, I thank God that George Bush was president on 9/11 and not Al Gore, and he was very, very strong.
John Kasich, a number of aw shucks moments about we can't get into this is so negative, I'm going to stay positive. How did you see it tonight, David?
So I think John Kasich, if you take what he said at face value, makes a really good point in that I think there are a lot of Democrats smiling tonight when the debate opens with the Republicans relitigating the Iraq War, which to this day is not popular, relitigating the George W. Bush presidency, which is popular in South Carolina, but still broadly not popular. And when you're running for the presidency, you want to be running towards the future and not relitigating the past. That's always used to trip up Democrats 10, 15, 20 years ago. So if you look at what John Kasich said, he's right. The problem is this is something that Chris Christie tried repeatedly, always looked good doing it, and Republican voters didn't respond to it. They want to see some of these fights. They want to see people mixing it up because it tells them that you're going to be able to mix it up against Hillary Clinton. And so John Kasich, I think, did fine for what he seems to be going for. And I know he's looking at states beyond South Carolina, but I don't think he did himself any favors in South Carolina tonight.
Speaking of that, Governor John Kasich is hoping to build on his second-place finish in New Hampshire, and he joins us tonight from the Spin Room in Greenville. Governor, thanks for being here.
Glad to be with you.
Your thoughts
by the way,
tonight?
there was a poll that came out earlier. Hey, Brett, there was a poll that came out tonight that showed me in second place in South Carolina. So we'll see how it goes. But, you know, people don't always know what they're talking about when they're pundits. They talk, but they don't always know what they're saying.
Yeah. What about tonight? What was your impression, your overall sense of things?
Well, somebody said it was like a demolition derby, but fortunately my car's still going around the track. And, look, it's been my intent to be positive, and you can't always tell when you're on the stage because you're kind of focused on your own thing, but it just seemed a tad more, not a tad, it was more contentious than what I think served the party well, myself. That's my view.
You know, Governor, tonight started in a sad way, and the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, and you took some time addressing that and also addressing the way forward for the selection of his replacement.
Well, look, my sense of it is that, you know, first of all, it's amazing. 2 minutes after a guy dies, we're already talking about the politics. But my sense is the president shouldn't put anybody forward unless he has somebody that everybody's going to say, hallelujah, that's our man or woman. But frankly, we're going to have a presidential election, and it's going to be an important election. It will also involve who's going to appoint the next Supreme Court justice. So I wish he would hold off. That'd be a good thing for our country so we can stop all the fighting that's going on and see if we can get ourselves together here a little bit. And then if I can become president, I'm going to appoint a conservative who's not going to make law but interpret law.
So where do you think this lines you up? You said there's a poll that shows you in second. Are you planning on winning South Carolina? What's your path?
No. We're going to do our best down here. You know, we're crafty people and we work hard and we're plucky, and but we're here. I'm going to be heading to Michigan next week. I think I'll be in Virginia. I'll be back here. No, I just want to say that, you know, it's not like we bet everything. You know, on New Hampshire, we had nothing going forward. We're running a national campaign. We are excited. I had 1,000 people in Sun City yesterday. 1,000. I mean, we have 50, 60 RSVPs, and 500 people are showing up. So it's good things going on, but we're here. We're going to get through here. We're going to move all across the country, and I'm looking forward to the day we get to vote in Ohio.
Well, Governor Kasich, we appreciate your time. We'll see you on the trail.
Thank you.
You know, the spin room is an amazing place. You take a look at it, and all the reporters gather around, and these signs, all the candidates have signs, and they're holding up signs. There you see Donald Trump talking to some reporters. It'd be interesting to see and hear his take of this evening. Obviously, he was fiery on a number of fronts, going after a number of candidates. There's our roaming camera. There's a Trump son. I think that's Eric Trump, talking to reporters. And what happens is they try to get a sense of the night from each of the candidates. Tonight, I think, is going to be interesting to see how all of these candidates respond to this, as Governor Kasich called it, demolition derby. We'll be talking to several of the candidates. We'll try to talk to all of them about how they did. Let's go back to the spin room right now in Greenville. Texas Senator Ted Cruz is there. Senator, thanks for being there. Your sense of this evening?
Well, look, I think it was a good night. There were some fireworks tonight, but I think the people of South Carolina saw some real contrast. This decision matters. This is a serious decision, and I think people are getting tired of the circus. They're getting tired of the reality show. And, you know, with Justice Scalia's passing today, it really underscores what the stakes are in this election. And I think the men and women of South Carolina are focusing on the records of the candidates and are asking, who do you trust? Who do you trust to always defend the Constitution, to defend the Bill of Rights, to make sure our fundamental liberties are protected, and also to keep America safe? And I think tonight helped them in making that decision-making.
On that issue, let's go back to the passing of Justice Scalia. You clerked at the Supreme Court. Obviously, it's a sad day, and we've expressed condolences, as did all the candidates, to his family. The sense of the loss, not only for the nation, for conservatives, but on the court.
Well, he was an extraordinary man. He was a wonderful man. He was witty. He was fun. He was full of life. He was brilliant. He was an incomparable writer. And his legacy on the court, there are only a handful of justices in the history of this country that have had a legacy on the court the way he has. And as Ronald Reagan was to the presidency, Antonin Scalia was to the Supreme Court. And so it is an enormous loss. I am very glad that, you know, this afternoon I called for the Senate not to confer confirm anyone this year, to make this election a referendum on the Supreme Court. I'm very glad to see Republican leadership heeding those calls, and for the rest of the year I'm going to continue to press. I think the people need to press leadership to honor that promise. But it really underscores the stakes of this election, that if Justice Scalia is replaced by a left-wing judicial activism, our most basic rights are in jeopardy: life, marriage, religious liberty. The Second Amendment, as I pointed out in the debate, if Donald Trump is our nominee, or if Donald Trump becomes president, the odds are unacceptably high that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms will be lost forever, because one more liberal will work to take away the right to keep and bear arms of every single individual American. We can't let that happen. We've got to fight to defend our liberties.
But the Constitution does say the President shall nominate to fill a vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Senate shall confirm or shoot down that nominee. Do you think it's okay to have a vacancy for a year?
Oh, sure, and we've seen this. It's been 80 years since a vacancy occurred and was confirmed in an election year. And this is what the election is all about. Let's let the people decide. Brett, I can't wait to be campaigning against Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders and take the case to the American people. Which vision of the court do you want? Do you want the Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders vision, where our religious liberty is stripped away, where abortion on demand, including partial birth abortion, is mandated for everyone, where our basic rights are stripped away, where school choice is struck down across the country, where veterans' memorials are torn down? Or do you want to get back to the constitutional liberties that built this country? That is why we have an election. And I trust the American people to make that decision.
Senator Cruz, Donald Trump's right behind you. Every time you're asked about Donald Trump, you always start with, he's a friend of mine, I like him. Today on that stage, he called you a liar. How many friends of yours call you liars?
Well, it is a strange dynamic, Brett, and both Donald Trump and Marco Rubio have a very similar pattern. When you point to their record, they get very upset and scream, liar, liar, liar. It's a very odd dynamic, and it's words out of their own mouth. Donald, on the stage tonight, advocated for taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. He said he thinks they do a terrific thing, and yet he screams, I'm a liar, for saying his own words. Donald Trump, in one of the previous debates, advocated for socialized medicine like Bernie Sanders. When I point that out, he responds, liar, liar, liar. Likewise, when anyone points to Marco Rubio's record on immigration and supporting amnesty, he just responds yelling liar.
So will your preamble change now
very strange
that he's
dynamic.
A friend and you like him?
Oh, look, I continue to like both Donald and Marco. But I do think the people of South Carolina need to ask, who do you trust? Who do you know will honor their commitments, will defend the Constitution, will stop amnesty? And I also think, Brett, a very important question tonight is who's prepared to be commander-in-chief. This is a dangerous world, and I don't think we can have a commander-in-chief who goes into the Situation Room and doesn't have a meaningful understanding of the enemies facing this country, doesn't know how to keep this country safe, doesn't know, as Donald doesn't, even what the nuclear triad is. At an earlier debate, he had no idea what the nuclear triad is. This is too dangerous of a world for a commander-in-chief that doesn't have the basic understandings necessary to keep this country safe.
Senator Cruz, thanks for your time tonight. We like having you on Fox News.
Thank you, Brett. It's always a pleasure.